A few years ago, unusual headlines started popping up in the international press. Journalists were reporting that Saudi Arabia was supposedly planning to build its own version of the Suez Canal. Some publications predicted a complete shakeup in the system of global trade. Other authors claimed that the new route would bypass the Strait of Hormuz and redraw the distribution of cargo flows between Asia, Europe, and the Middle East. The story sounded so epic, you wanted to believe it. But the more I studied the map of the region, the more questions I had. Between the seas that were supposed to be connected lay hundreds of miles of challenging terrain. And it gradually became clear that the most interesting part of this story had nothing to do with talk of a canal. Most people don't often think about just how vulnerable modern global trade is. There are dozens of significant sea routes on the world map, but some of them play a special role. If traffic on such a section is interrupted for even a few days, the consequences are felt far beyond the region. For many decades now, the Strait of Hormuz has remained one of these places. From a satellite's perspective, it looks pretty unremarkable. A narrow strip of water separates Iran from the states of the Arabian Peninsula. But this outward simplicity is deceptive. Huge volumes of oil, petroleum products, and other cargo move through this passage every day. For the global economy, Hormuz has long been one of the most crucial transportation arteries on the entire planet. The strait's uniqueness isn't just about the number of ships passing through. What's far more important is that the countries in the region have virtually no way to get by without it. And this dependence works in both directions. The Gulf states send oil to buyers through the strait, but they also receive food, building materials, electronics, and thousands of other goods back along the same routes. The very same transportation artery serves both exports and imports simultaneously. This is why any reports of tension in the Hormuz area instantly grab the attention of markets all over the world. Over the last few decades, this dependence has only grown stronger. The population increased, cities expanded, and new industrial zones appeared. All of this required a continuous flow of goods. The more dynamically the region developed, the more important the uninterrupted operation of sea routes became. That's precisely why the governments of the Persian Gulf countries began looking for alternatives long before today's megaprojects. But at some point, Saudi Arabia decided to take a much broader look at the problem. In Riyadh, they gradually came to the conclusion that this was about more than just the security of supplies. The issue concerned the future of the country as a whole. If the world eventually becomes less dependent on oil, the kingdom would need a fundamentally new model for economic development. This is how the strategy known today as Vision 2030 took shape. It's often associated with futuristic projects and massive construction. However, in reality, the concept runs much deeper. The country's leadership aims to build an economy that can generate income not only from resource extraction, but also from its position on the world map. If you look at the region's geography, this logic becomes clear. Saudi Arabia is located between several of the planet's largest economic areas. From here, it's relatively convenient to work with the markets of Europe, Asia, and Africa. Few nations possess such an advantageous position at the crossroads of international routes. But a favorable location in itself is no guarantee of success. World history is full of examples of countries with excellent geography that were never able to turn it into a stable source of income. This requires infrastructure, capital investment, and the ability to integrate into global logistics chains. And this is where the most interesting part of the whole picture begins. The deeper you dive into studying the Saudi plans, the more clearly you understand that it was never about one single canal. Hiding behind the splashy newspaper headlines is a much broader strategy, encompassing dozens of interconnected components. One of the most well-known projects in recent years has been NEOM. Thanks to its impressive presentations, it got on the radar of even those who typically don't pay much attention to the Middle East's economy. Futuristic cities, cutting-edge technologies, and unconventional architectural designs very quickly grabbed the headlines in international media. However, behind the colorful visuals lies a much more down-to-earth and pragmatic calculation. The location for the project was by no means chosen at random. NEOM is being built near a territory through which key routes between Asia and Europe pass. For potential investors, this kind of proximity could prove to be just as attractive as the most advanced technological developments. You just have to look at a map to appreciate the strategic importance of this area. The Gulf of Aqaba is right nearby. A little further south lies the Red Sea, and even further on, the path to the Suez Canal opens up. Thousands of ships pass through these waters every year, transporting goods between the planet's largest economies. But this is precisely where the question that sparked talks of a new canal arises. Saudi Arabia has access to two strategically important maritime areas at once. To the east lies the Persian Gulf. To the west stretches the Red Sea. At first glance, the idea of connecting these two routes seems perfectly reasonable. When I first came across this line of reasoning, it seemed quite convincing to me. On a regular political map, the distance between the two coasts doesn't seem like something unattainable. The country's vast expanses almost seem to suggest the idea of a direct transportation corridor all on their own. But then I pulled up a topographic map, and within just a few minutes, it became obvious why professionals approach these kinds of projects so cautiously. Instead of relatively flat plains, my eyes were met with mountain ranges, rocky plateaus, and areas with major elevation changes. At that moment, the whole story of a new Saudi Suez Canal started to look completely different. On paper, the problem can be solved using locks. This is exactly the principle by which many canals around the world operate. A ship gradually rises to the required height, travels a section of the route, and then descends back to sea level. However, there is always a huge gap between theory and practice. The greater the change in elevation, the more complex and expensive the entire structure becomes. In Saudi Arabia's case, engineers would have to deal not with individual hills, but with entire mountain ranges. Besides the colossal amount of excavation work, another question would inevitably arise. Where would they get the water for a huge number of locks in one of the driest places on the planet? Even the wealthiest nation cannot ignore such limitations forever. This is precisely why most experts view the idea of a new Saudi canal with unconcealed skepticism. The deeper you dive into the actual conditions on the ground, the more clearly you understand that the high-profile project exists mainly in newspaper columns and online discussions. The kingdom's real plans are developing in completely different directions. It is noteworthy that abandoning the canal construction does not mean abandoning the goal itself. If you look closely at Saudi Arabia's actions in recent years, you can see a certain pattern. The state is trying to solve the same problem using fundamentally different methods. Not by forcing ships to cross the country by water, but by building a system that allows cargo to move across it by land, quickly and without unnecessary delays. At first glance, the difference seems insignificant. To an outside observer, a container is still a container, regardless of whether it travels by sea or by rail. But for logistics companies, these are fundamentally different categories. Sometimes, saving a few days turns out to be way more important than the cost of the shipping itself. This is particularly evident in high-tech industries. Modern businesses are increasingly shifting to a minimal inventory principle. Companies try to avoid keeping large batches of parts in their warehouses and count on receiving the necessary components at the exact right moment. Any serious delay rapidly leads to a shutdown of the production process. Because of this, the structure of global trade is gradually transforming. While the cost of shipping used to be the main criterion in almost all cases, today the speed and reliability of the route are becoming more and more important. For certain types of cargo, companies are willing to pay significantly more to reduce transit time than they were just some 20 years ago. This is precisely where railroads come to the forefront. Many people are used to seeing them as a domestic mode of transport within individual countries. Meanwhile, in recent years, more and more nations are viewing railway corridors as a tool for international competition. And this isn't just about passenger transportation by any means. For Saudi Arabia, this opens up some interesting prospects. The country has a vast territory that can be used to lay overland corridors between different parts of the region. If a container can quickly cross the peninsula by rail, a significant portion of logistical challenges can be solved, without the need to build a canal. And we are not talking about just one single route. A whole network of interconnected infrastructure projects is gradually taking shape. New railway lines connect to ports, the ports get access to industrial zones, and warehouses, terminals, and cargo processing facilities are popping up near major transportation hubs. This kind of approach has another significant advantage. A canal remains a single entity. If a serious problem arises in it, it affects the entire route. A logistics network operates on a different principle. It always has more options for rerouting flows and adapting to changing conditions. But if you take a broader look at the situation, it becomes obvious that Saudi Arabia is by no means operating in a vacuum. Right next door are countries that have been building their own transportation systems for many years and have no intention of giving up their positions to a new competitor. First and foremost, we are talking about the United Arab Emirates. Over the past decades, they have managed to form one of the most developed logistics infrastructures in the entire region. Colossal volumes of cargo pass through their ports, and many international companies view the country as a key distribution center. The Emirates' advantage lies not only in its modern infrastructure. The experience gained over the years plays an equally important role. When a major corporation chooses a shipping route, it doesn't evaluate just one individual port or one terminal. It studies the entire ecosystem: banks, insurance companies, warehouses, customs procedures, and access to international markets. It's entirely possible to build such a system, but it takes years and sometimes even decades. The fight for logistical supremacy is rarely just about building individual facilities. What's far more important is the ability to turn infrastructure into a single, cohesive system. You just have to look at a map of the Middle East to understand why the competition here is so fierce. Every new port hopes to pull over a piece of the existing market. Every transportation corridor strives to convince clients to choose its specific route. There is another player, though, that often stays out of the big discussions. Its projects rarely make the front pages of global publications, yet many analysts are watching its moves closely. We're talking about Oman. Compared to its wealthy neighbors, Oman looked pretty unremarkable for a long time. No one there is building futuristic megacities that cost hundreds of billions. But sometimes, your location on the map means more than splashy presentations. And in Oman's case, this is especially true. Most of the Persian Gulf countries are, to some extent, tied to the Strait of Hormuz. Oman finds itself in a more advantageous position. A number of its key ports have direct access to the open ocean and can operate without needing to pass through this narrow maritime corridor. When I delved deeper into this topic, the example of Oman seemed the most surprising to me. Public discussions about Middle Eastern logistics invariably bring up Dubai, Riyadh, big money, and massive construction projects. But a country that just happens to have well-positioned ports remains somewhere on the sidelines of the conversation. Although for a shipper looking to avoid unnecessary risks, this quiet alternative could be more valuable than any megaproject. The story of the port of Duqm is particularly telling. Just a few decades ago, this place played virtually no significant role in international trade. Today, a major industrial area with terminals, businesses, and transportation infrastructure is taking shape around it. For Oman, this is an attempt to carve out its own niche in the region's changing logistics system. The picture that emerges as a result is quite complex. Saudi Arabia is laying down railways and creating industrial zones. The Emirates are refining their already functioning ecosystem. Oman is offering routes that bypass the strait. Each of these players is trying to convince international business that its infrastructure is the one to trust. And they are all fighting for the same thing, for the right to control the future routes of world trade. As a result, it becomes clear that the struggle is for a resource far more valuable than it first appears. Whoever manages to attract a significant share of the cargo flows will gain not only transit revenues, but also substantial political influence. In the modern world, transport corridors have long ceased to be just roads. To grasp the scale of what is happening, you need to look far beyond the region's borders. The key decisions about the movement of goods are not made in Riyadh, Dubai, or Muscat at all. Very often, they are made in Beijing, Mumbai, Shanghai, or in European financial centers. China's role here is especially noticeable. In recent years, Chinese companies have invested colossal sums in the development of port infrastructure around the world. For Beijing, transportation routes have long become as much of a strategic resource as energy or high technology. The more reliably the trade chains operate, the more stable the entire economy feels. At the same time, China's interest is not limited to just maritime shipping. Across Eurasia, land routes, railway connections, and multimodal transportation systems are being actively developed. Their goal is not to completely replace sea transport. What is far more important is to establish backup options in case the situation changes. A similar logic is gradually gaining importance for India as well. The country's economy is rapidly developing. Foreign trade volumes are growing, and its industry requires an ever-increasing amount of resources and components. The nations of the Arabian Peninsula hold an exceptionally advantageous position between the manufacturing hubs of Asia and the key markets of Europe. It is for this very reason that many Indian companies are closely monitoring the development of infrastructure projects in this region. It is noteworthy that just a few decades ago, topics like these rarely attracted widespread public interest. Ports, warehouses, and railroads were perceived as dull subjects, understood only by a narrow group of specialists. Today, the situation has changed noticeably. One only has to recall any of the serious disruptions in international shipping that have occurred in recent years. Their consequences very quickly affected the prices of goods, delivery times, and the operations of businesses around the world. A huge part of the modern economy relies on an extensive network of transportation links, and this has now become obvious to everyone. Against this backdrop, Saudi Arabia's actions take on a much more understandable logic. The country is striving to integrate itself into processes whose role is steadily growing. And we are not talking about a short-term project lasting a few years. Many infrastructure decisions are being made with a planning horizon of several decades. However, this raises a natural question. What happens if all these investments do not yield the expected results? History knows plenty of examples where ambitious projects made a strong impression at presentations, but then collided with harsh economic reality. It is much easier to build a port than to convince international companies to use it regularly. It is simpler to lay a railway line than to ensure a stable flow of cargo along it. That is why work in the areas of legislation, capital attraction, and the creation of a favorable environment for international business is no less important. In logistics, Infrastructure without a reputation simply does not function. At the same time, global trade never stands still. Manufacturing centers shift, consumer markets expand or shrink, and political relationships between nations determine the direction of cargo flows. Add to that port automation, new supply chain management technologies, and constantly updated industry standards. Nations have to make decisions planning for decades ahead, without a clear understanding of what the world will look like 20 years from now. Nevertheless, there is one compelling reason why countries continue to pour colossal funds into such projects. History has convincingly shown that controlling key routes has almost always provided tangible advantages. Eras have come and gone. Technologies and modes of transport have changed. Yet the importance of trade routes has invariably remained. Back in the day, wealth was concentrated around caravan roads and seaports. Later, railroads and ocean routes began to play the defining role. Today, this function is being taken over by container terminals, distribution centers, and transportation corridors that connect different corners of the planet. Just a short time ago, the Persian Gulf countries were perceived primarily through the lens of oil and gas. It was their hydrocarbon reserves that defined their place in the global economy. Today, the situation is gradually becoming more complex. What is hidden underground is drawing less and less interest compared to what is being built on the surface. This, for me, was the most unexpected discovery in this whole story. You start looking into another news story about the construction of a new canal in the middle of the desert, and you end up immersed in researching how entire countries are striving to secure their place in the global freight system. The deeper you delve into this topic, the less important the canal itself becomes, and the more pressing the question of what the future of global logistics will be. As it turns out, the talk about a new Saudi Suez Canal was somewhat inaccurate from the very beginning. The real project isn't about digging a waterway between two seas at all. Instead of one grandiose structure, Saudi Arabia is creating a whole network of interconnected facilities that are meant to function as a single transportation system. The Suez Canal changed global trade not because it was an outstanding feat of engineering. It proved to be essential because it saved time, resources, and money. Any new transportation corridor goes through the exact same test. Ultimately, the market doesn't choose the most spectacular project, but the most practical one. It is precisely this test that the Saudi calculation is now undergoing. And if it proves to be correct, the consequences for the entire region could be far more significant than just the appearance of another canal on the world map.